We better get back, because it'll be dark soon, and they mostly come at night. Mostly.
Welcome to Mostly Horror.
Mostly.
Damn,
so
dude, that's fucked up. Anyone that listens, anyone that knows the show and knows the cadence of what happens there. Damn.
That's like horror, man. You know what that was? That's called a jump scare. That was a goddamn jump scare.
That's like swearing in the middle of your daily
Church?
prayer or something. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Anyways, I'm Steve. That's Sean. We have a great episode today, joined by Gabriel Bier Gislason, who's the director of a film called Attachment that came out last year, now on Shudder. Quick synopsis, a quick breakdown of Attachment. For those who may not know, I'm going to read this right off of IMDb because they do a good job. Maya, a Danish has-been actress, falls in love with Leah, a Jewish academic from London. Leah suffers a mysterious seizure and Maya returns with her to London. There, she meets Leah's mother, Hannah, a woman who could hold dark secrets. Really enjoyed the film Attachment. Really enjoyed talking to Gabriel. We'll get into that in a moment. But before that, let's get into some things that you probably already know.
I'm sure you already knew that.
You only tell me stuff I already know.
You already know what I'm going to tell you.
Sean, you and I talked about this. We just saw a screener of a film that's coming out that we can't talk about for a little bit. But before the screener, we talked about something. Finally, a year after its release, Prey is getting a physical Blu-ray and 4K.
And it looks saucy, too. It looks nice.
It looks sick. Listen,
yeah.
Prey was Emmy nominated. It was only on Hulu. It didn't go to theaters, which is a goddamn shame.
Yeah.
It's, Dan Trachtenberg, who also directed 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is a fantastic film, really knocked it out of the park with Prey. I think we've talked about it a bit. What a great premise. Amber Mid-Thunder, the lead, is amazing in it. And me, as a collector of physical media, so excited that this is finally getting a release in October.
Yeah. It's going to look nice on that shelf back there.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Man, I was just talking, correct me, did we just talk about Prey again recently when, with Chris Dudley? Or did I do that in Michigan with some friends at Motor City Nightmares?
I can't remember.
No?
We talked about
Either
a lot
way,
of stuff with Chris.
Yeah, that's true. We talked a lot about aliens. But we've already talked about Prey a bit. I just want to go ahead and re-say that Prey is so sick. If you guys haven't seen it yet, you need to watch it. I'm no diehard Predator fan, but I do enjoy Predator. And this is my favorite Predator movie. I like it more than any of the other Predator movies that I've seen. That's not to shit on any of the other Predator movies, but Prey's the shit. And
we did talk about this with Chris. We did.
Was it with Chris? That's what I thought.
Yeah, it was.
That's what I thought.
Chris.
I was like, that sounds.
Because we were talking about remakes or not remakes, but extensions of things and how everything should just take the Prey approach and just be somewhere fucking new.
And we were talking about aliens, so it's a circle. But
there's a lot of new stuff that's going to be on this behind the scenes, a panel film or a filming of a panel with the cast and crew, an alternative opening scene. We just recorded an hour plus interview, so my words are a little scattered. A bunch of deleted scenes, audio commentaries. I personally think this is a ploy from Disney, who technically owns this film, to make money while they can't film anything because of the strikes.
Sure.
And as always, Sean and I support the strikers, and hopefully that's resolved soon, and everyone from the WGA and SAG get what they want. But this feels like a ploy. As much as I want this, it feels like, well, we got to get something, got to get some revenue.
So I'll put it out there this way. If you guys want to actively not go get Prey because fuck Disney, I support that. If you want to go get the physical copy of Prey to support Prey, and I'm assuming that the makers would at least get a portion of physical. I
I'd
guess
hope
I
so.
don't know what their contracts are.
Yeah,
Then do that. Support it either way,
Yeah.
but either way, we obviously here we're gonna keep saying it. We said it a million times. We're gonna keep saying it. We stand fully with all of the unions and the strikers right now. Fuck the big wigs at top, dude. Fuck
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse. But Prey rules.
Anyways, something else that you may already know, we're recording this on the 50th anniversary of the Texas Chain Massacre. Actually,
Can we get some chainsaw sounds, Chelsea?
I said
And some
Texas
screams?
I said Texas Chain Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But not only that, the video game, Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game, has come out today. I think it's made by the same people who made the Jason game. I know that there's the Friday the 13th game. I know there's a lot of people who love that, but it had its run and the servers are down now and you can't play it.
Sure.
But I know that there's a ton of hype behind this game.
Yep.
Honestly, I would love to chat with the people who made it, but essentially you can take on the role of one of the notorious Slaughter family or their victims in the third-person asymmetrical horror experience based on Hooper's groundbreaking and iconic 1974 film. As a victim, you can use your wits and stealth to stay out of the family's reach and find the tools you need to lead to your eventual freedom. Meanwhile, the Slaughter family players must seek out, track down, and stop their guests from escaping. Those words are from Mike Wilson in his Bloody Disgusting article about this game. But it's available now on all the consoles. So curious to see how it does and how long it runs for, if they're going to shut it down or how that works.
Yeah. I think because I know we talked about this when it was like first announced and when all the stuff was going on with Friday the 13th. But I'm not the biggest fan of these. I don't know what to call them. There's a name for this type of game, but these like round based, like games of tag essentially. Or like capture the flag meets tag. It's not usually my thing. But I'm very excited about this and I'm hoping that it helps change my I keep burping. Changes my perspective on it. I got the Evil Dead one recently, which you should honestly get because I know Cam and Coulter wanted to mess around, so maybe we can figure everything out.
Coulter was at least hitting me about playing games recently, so that's a good.
Yeah,
we can do that.
We should do it. But yeah, I'm excited, and we'll see how it is, and hopefully it brings something new to that table as well. And also really curious if any of the listeners have been playing these types of games or have other recs. Let us know.
Yeah. This is called a third-person asymmetrical horror game. I think the asymmetrical happens because you can play on either side.
Sure.
There was a number of games like this that came out in the early like 2010s or mid 2010s. It felt like there was a one where you could be the monster or you could be the hunters, like that sort of game.
Right.
And now this is
like
continued.
Wait, like Prey?
Is that what the game was called? Prey?
There's a game called Prey. I don't remember if you could be the monsters, but it was like
I don't know if it was Prey. Who cares? But regardless, that sort of gameplay. So that game's out. And then the other thing that you probably already know, we talked about this when it was first announced, but we finally got our first look images at the new Monarch Legacy of the Monsters Monsterverse series that's coming out on Apple Plus. This is the Godzilla series that's coming out on Apple Plus that we talked about a while back. You had a weird look on your face. I was like, do you not know what I'm talking about?
I was listening to you and yeah. Yep.
10 episode series. Godzilla looks cool in the shot that you can see Godzilla. I think it's really cool that Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell are in this film together. It's an interesting dynamic. The one thing I will say about it is the Chris Black is one of the co-developers. He's one of the executive producers on Severance. So I trust his brain.
Sure.
It also has one of the producers of Hawkeye and a producer of WandaVision, co-developing this. So I'm really curious how this is going to be. I think, as always, as soon as you go away from the monsters, I'm worried about what's going to happen in terms of the story.
Sure.
I think you need to Godzilla versus Kong did a great job at really focusing on the monsters, and I hope that they don't take that for granted in this film, but we'll see.
I need like we do not. We've talked about this a bit, as Godzilla has come up and kaiju movies and stuff. Just over, I liked the Bryan Cranston one, and Godzilla versus Kong is honestly is it my least favorite of the three or the second guy? I don't know. It's
King of All Monsters rules.
Is that the one with King Ghidorah? Is that number 2?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it rules, but King Ghidorah doesn't. Like they really like butchered him. No. He looked like PlayStation 3 graphics. Either way, my point is I still haven't seen. I gotta take a deeper look at the show release. I didn't realize that happened. You're informing me right now, but I'm open to it. And I don't need it to just be monsters, but I do want plenty of monsters. But then also you can give me compelling other characters to experience this happening through. You can. I'm open.
It is where they have traditionally struggled in the past, is what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to point out.
I guess, yeah. Sure. It's 11's story is the one I find like the least memorable in all of that in terms of like the humans. Yeah.
All of them are not great.
I
didn't care about Bryan Cranston.
I like Bryan Cranston.
I don't even remember the other one.
Dude, Bryan Cranston, Kick-Ass, and Wanda. Walter, Kick-Ass, and Wanda taking on Godzilla. I'm in it, dude. I'm in it. You need a rewatch. All right, but either way, I'm excited. I'm excited for the show. Well, so I have a thing to bring up.
Yeah,
I'm curious if you heard about it. So American Horror Story recently released their poster. Well, no, listen, this is why. We're going to talk about it. We don't care. We don't love American Horror Story, and we used to feel kind of bad talking about it because it's like we understand that a lot of horror fans like it, and we're not trying to shit on the people that make it, and blah 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 blah. I think now we can freely just be like, fuck that show, because so they recently put out their imagery for it, and the poster's got like, I'm pretty sure it's Emma Roberts with like a baby that's a spider and it's got legs and whatever.
Yeah, one has Kim K, one has Cara Delevingne.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there is a bunch of stuff going on online about that show and those people crossing picket lines. They are in production of this show and are now technically a scab production. They are a scab. They're using scab writers. All of those people are scab actors. It's a complicated thing. I haven't been able to find a ton of articles about it, but I'm going to read some segments from this Deadline article.
One quick thing about Deadline, although if this is something that is about the scab people, then that's one thing. But Deadline has consistently been the press outlet with which AMPTP people are positing things. Basically, Deadline will drop an article saying reports that the AMPTP and the WGA have tried to do negotiations, but the WGA won't agree to blah blah blah, like trying to make the unions look bad.
I didn't realize.
Deadline has been the one that like it's owned by someone that's a part of whatever studio. But regardless, I mean, there's good articles and bad articles. So.
Well, yeah, I guess my main thing is just Kim Kardashian has really, like, her name has taken over fucking everything. And so I clicked on the article that isn't really talking about it, or that isn't like focused on her. Yeah. You know what I mean? But yeah, basically people are the internet and a lot of the picketers are responding to this show doing it. And I guess we don't have a ton of details. I don't want to super go through that article hearing what you just said, because I don't want to take anything from it, and it looks like everything else is Kim K. So maybe we just got to wait a little bit to hear more.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you're I don't know if this is the article you're referring to, but there is a Deadline article from Lynetta Rice where she talks about Kim K on Friday. This is back in June. But Kim K tweeted from set and said, "I'm on set of AHS and we have some time between shows. What are you all up to?" But this is a production that has continued even during the WGA strike. I think that was before the
Yeah,
SAG strike.
That's
but
that is
yeah.
for sure. Like we
mean,
know
listen,
that. I mean, there are people striking outside of the production.
Yeah, American Horror Story since season 3 has felt like it's been written by scab writers, so nothing's gonna fucking change.
I'm gonna be honest. As much like listeners, go ahead and read up on this. Is this something you're particularly interested in? I am honestly thrilled by this because I just feels good to fully release and be like, I can just say that I think this show is fucking whack sauce. I made a TikTok about it a few months ago, and I had to like respond to a comment that someone made making like assumptions about me about it. And I know that a lot of people love this show. I'm not trying to shit on anybody that has gotten a lot of enjoyment over American Horror Story, but I can say that season 1 was the only season I ever liked at all. I really tried. And this is not for lack of trying. I fucking tried. I got halfway through season 2 like twice. I didn't initially watch 3, but then I went to watch 4, and I got like 4 episodes into that and was just bored out of my mind, and it just felt like a fucking soap opera. And then people were like, well, you gotta watch 3. Coven's so good. I'm telling you, Coven's so good. I love Coven. And I couldn't even get through the first episode of Coven like 3 times. It's just not a good show. It's not good. And now I have a justified reason to be like, fuck that show. I can truly just say everything about it is whack.
Even watching back on the first season, it is not great. It's schlock.
Yeah.
I don't even want to talk about American Horror Story anymore, but I'm glad to know that. I feel the same release as you. Interesting. Well, as we said, we have a great interview today, conversation with Gabriel Bier Gislason, the director of Attachment. If you are listening to this, check out Attachment before you listen to our conversation. It's currently on Shudder. It is a wonderful film that takes some unique perspectives that you don't normally see in horror. So excited for people to check it out. Also excited for everyone to listen to our conversation with Gabriel. Sean, any final thoughts before we get them over to it?
Attachment fucking rules, man. It's we talk about it in the interview, but truly it is just, it's one of the, I mean, we obviously watch a lot of horror movies, watch a lot of indie movies. I see a lot of movies I like every year, see a lot of movies I don't like every year. This movie sticks out to me. The first time I watched it, I left it being like, wow, I really enjoyed that. And it's different than what I thought I was getting myself into. It surprised me. But then I didn't think about it a ton, you know. I was like, oh, we should get someone from that and blah, blah, blah. We finally, you know, we landed this interview, and rewatching it made me realize I just like it even more than I thought that I did. If you guys haven't seen it, it is on Shudder. Highly recommend that you check it out. Obviously before the interview, we get full spoiler territory. Yeah, it's a gem, and our conversation with Gabriel is a gem as well.
Yep. On that note, we will get you guys over to our conversation with Gabriel Bier Gislason, director of Attachment, and stick around for our Mostly Horror Racks at the end of the episode. All right, we are joined today by Gabriel Bier Gislason. Gabriel is a writer-director whose debut feature, Attachment, premiered last year on Shudder. Gabriel, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh,
Absolutely.
We're so stoked to have you. Yeah, it's we're gonna go ahead and put a disclaimer out there for you and for all the listeners. We are gonna deep dive this, so if you have not seen Attachment yet, hit pause, go watch it, come back and break down the movie with us. We were just telling Gabriel that we are really big fans of this movie, and we're really excited to jump into it. With that, though, Gabriel, I want to ask you a question that we ask all of our guests when we bring them on. It's one of our favorite questions to ask. We're curious about your intros to horror, your intros to the genre. We're looking for moments where maybe you were a little kid and you snuck out of your room and saw something from behind the couch that you weren't supposed to see, or you had an adult in your life expose you to stuff maybe a little bit earlier than they should. Do you have anything like that you can tell us about today?
You know, it's so funny. I actually did a whole podcast about this exact thing. Because, like, I mean, I grew up around film. Like both my parents work in film, and my grandmother, who probably exposed me to even more movies than my parents did. She wasn't in film. She was like a public school teacher, but she was obsessed with movies. So I was exposed to a bunch of movies at a way too premature age. Like nowadays, I'll like rewatch a classic that they showed me. I'm like, what the fuck were they thinking? like, does this explain something that happened to me?
Right,
like, I don't know. Like, it's a weird. But weirdly, the first movie I recall being really afraid of, and this is what I went on another podcast to talk about, was my grandmother. My dad's family they're like huge Mel Brooks fans. My dad's, when he was like a teen, he was a projectionist at a movie theater in Copenhagen, and he would play Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles for like, I mean, back then movies would run for like almost a year. But so I was at like a Blockbuster or whatever it was, like some kind of video store with my grandmother, and she saw that there was a new Mel Brooks movie there, and it was Dracula Dead and Loving It, and she took that home and showed it to me, and I got so freaked out by it, because I think there's that weird thing where, like, there's a crucial age at which you start to understand irony, but but that's not at like 5 or 6 or however old I was when I saw that. Like that was too early. Yeah. So like I still got that there were bits of it that were funny, but there were also bits of it that were absolutely fucking terrifying to me. Even though like now I realize like none of it was meant to be even remotely scary. Yeah, but like shadows, there's like a scene of like a shadow, like Dracula's shadow creeps towards Peter McNichol's character and then like stumbles. And I at that age didn't get that was scary. That was just freaking me. Like, what the fuck? Like shadows will like wrap themselves around you and fall. Like,
stay the fuck away from me, shadows.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was my first. That is the earliest memory I have of being like freaked out by a movie. And I got so freaked out that like literally had to. She lived in like a little walk up in Copenhagen with like in an apartment of her own, and then my grandfather had a little apartment below her and stuff like that. But I had to like run out onto the landing, out onto the stairs because I got so freaked out by the movie. So that's my first memory of being scared. I think like other than that, when I got a little older and I started getting really into like spending my allowance on DVDs, when I was, I think from like 11 onwards, I kind of stumbled across Sam Raimi, and I think Evil Dead 2. I bought I don't know if you guys remember, like the steel case. There was it was almost like a lunchbox that Anchor Bay put out for Evil Dead 2, and that I bought that with my allowance. I must have been 12 at most, and that was like the first time I was like, oh, I'm discovering a genre on my own, because I've been exposed to so many movies, but aside from like the sort of venerated classics, my parents weren't really horror people, and I got to kind of find it on my own, and that was the first time where I felt like, oh, this is a movie that I found that I think is awesome, that I'm gonna really like I'm gonna chart my own path through the genre.
And that just set you
money
as
well
a horror
spent.
fan. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's that moment where you realize, oh my god, I'm a fucking nerd.
Yeah, precisely. Not that like the sort of weird like Gandalf costumes and Tolkien books were any giveaway before then, but now I had like a new
avenue. Yeah, huge Evil Dead 2 fan specifically. So I just throw that out there. Go ahead, Steve.
With that being your intro, were you just a fan, or were you more kind of like discovering this like type of film or type of genre that you hadn't seen before? Like, would you consider yourself, a holistic horror fan? Like, obviously you have, a film that's about, Jewish mysticism and Jewish horror, but just like top down, would you consider yourself a horror fan?
I don't, it's hard for me because, to be honest, I don't know if I feel like I ever, aside from the fact that it was something I got to experience a bit more on my own than a lot of other genres, I don't know if I ever felt that like my enthusiasm for horror films was that distinct than my enthusiasm for any other kind of movie, like
just film in general.
It's just film in general. I think the point where I got really interested in it as something that I wanted to try my hand at was much later. Like I just really liked watching horror films the way that I liked watching anything else. But I think because there was just like, as a matter of just like chance, when I was at film school at I went to the graduate film program at NYU,
Yeah.
and when I was at film school there, that was sort of the height of the. I'm putting this in scare quotes because I hate the term, but like the elevated horror boom.
Yeah. Sure.
I hate the term because like I don't think that any of it's more elevated than other stuff necessarily, or like at least relative to any other genre. But because that was happening while I was in film school, and like when you're in film school, it's this weird part in your life where you're just like, constantly thinking about how films work when you watch them. And this was at this time there were just so many good like new horror movies coming out. Like, this was sort of around something like the Babadook and Ari Aster's movies and Bob Eggers movies and all these.
Yeah,
exactly. All these things, Get Out, like all these movies coming out. And because as a film student, I was sort of so hyper aware of what I was watching all the time, I really started to notice like, oh, it's kind of wild, like in a way. This is going to sound really kind of film schooly and pretentious, so bear with me. But like, I think this is just what I was thinking when that was going on. Like this as a genre, like horror, really just like is so dependent and reliant on the basic building blocks of cinema. In that, like the thing that matters more than anything is like where is the camera and when, and where are your cuts and when. Like what are you choosing to show at any given moment, and what are you not choosing to show at any given moment. And I got really into thinking about like, as someone who loves movies, like this could be, and who generally is kind of genre agnostic and believes that like, any genre is just a way of telling a story. Like, I was like, this would be a way to tell a story that would be really challenging and interesting because it would force me to really think about, how I use the basic tools and resources of the medium, which is good if you're, making a low budget movie and you don't really have a lot else to throw at it. So, So that I think is how. So that's a very long-winded way of saying I don't know if I, as such, consider myself a horror fan above anything else. But because of just the specific timing of when I went to film school, I certainly it became a very like big part of how I think about what is and isn't cinematic. And so that's how I sort of want to work.
That
makes so much sense.
I love that. I also want to say, I love speaking to like the intentionality of the filmmaking. I want to say when we get later on in this episode, I want to talk more about the camera work and attachment because it is something, I'm more on the film nerd spectrum as well. So I want to dive into that. But correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't your mom direct Bird Box as well?
She did, yeah.
Is that like a weird, ironic thing like that? Just because her filmography is obviously like pretty diverse. So for her to get a quasi horror film,
it was really funny because she was working on that while I was at film school as well. I was in New York and they were shooting it in LA, and she's like not a big horror person. So there was a lot of like conversations we had throughout where she was like, so like, how do they usually do that in horror movies? And I'd be like, okay, well, you should probably watch this. It did very well. So, she figured it out, but it was really funny. It was really interesting speaking to someone about these scenes. And I was like, oh shit, you haven't seen these movies that I just presuppose if I'm talking to someone else and they're making a horror movie, they will have seen these movies. And that was a really fun kind of weird experience. But I think she would probably herself also say that like what she is really interested in is like dramatic relationships, like the relationship between characters. So I think that's what she thought was interesting in that film. And I think, there's so many reasons to not compare ourselves, including the fact that she's had immense success and I've made one movie. But also I think like I'm also very interested in relationships. But I think I maybe am a little more like into like the, like we're just talking like how does this genre actually work? Like what are the what are the mechanics of it? But yeah,
I love that. I love the idea of someone being like, well, I got offered a horror film to direct, but I don't have reference points for some of these things, and you being like, I got it, it's fine.
Yeah.
We obviously want to talk about attachment. And as a jumping off point, you're from Copenhagen. We're saying you're in Montreal right now. You went to school at Tisch Film School, NYU. This film starts off in Denmark, and the actual name of it, the translation is The Night Has Eyes, which is a line taken from a song that is sung at the beginning. And while I do enjoy the name attachment and it makes sense in the context of the film, I'm curious why, or if you had any say, or why there was a change.
I had total say in this.
Okay.
For better or worse. So yeah, The Night Has Eyes is a lyric from a song in it. And I love it. There was something about how it sounds in Danish that I really loved, and it has like a slightly different sort of weird poetic quality than it does in English.
Got it.
Whereas in English, it's just sounded a bit generic to me. Like it was very close to Hills Have Eyes. You know, it had these other things.
That makes sense.
But the truth is, attachment also came before the English title came first, because my production designer and I were talking about what to call it. Originally, it was just called Dybbuk, and I was like, I can't call it Dybbuk because that's gonna
give it away.
Give it away. That's gonna fuck it up.
Yeah.
And then she just like sent me like the dictionary, kind of the Yiddish translation of it, and it says is like a Dybbuk comes from the Yiddish word for it's like a case of attachment. And I was like, holy shit! Like this whole movie is about like attachment issues and like people who can't and like umbilical cords not being properly cut and like all these things. And I was like, I like it. And like for some people it really rings, like some people really dig it. Some people would have preferred the literal translation. I'm still very into it for just the pure like kind of like the sort of psycho like therapy speech connotations of it.
Right.
But it's meant sort of like as a slightly more ironic play on words than I think necessarily always comes across, which is a good thing to learn in this industry. That like I have to be a little bit more careful with that. But yeah, I know. I liked the idea that it also would like put the viewers, they would put the viewer on. It would sort of invite one way of thinking that the story is going to play out, which is very focused on this mother-daughter relationship, and then like the inherent pun in it of like a Dybbuk is a thing that attaches itself to you would only kind of become apparent later. Which I think, as much as I love the Danish title, sort of like weird lyricism, doesn't really give any indication of what the story is going to be. It just sounds nice, like it's like I'm into how it sounds. I like that that's and it sort of helps emphasize the song that becomes kind of important throughout the film.
I completely agree. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no. It's just the only thing that we realize is that there's no good Danish word for attachment. Like it doesn't translate literally, and everything else was. Nothing really had the. Nothing really contained that sort of layered meaning and would work as a pun, and so that's why we had to have a different Danish title.
I mean, it's cool that you get two different titles of you get to just run two different titles of your film. I also love like the way that the title sequence is, the way that the film is shot and the titles are popping up at the beginning with the specific color of yellow, and the font style is really cool looking. And then when, a little bit into the film, maybe 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes into the film, you get the title and it comes up near the lyrics of the song. Aesthetically it looked really nice, and it made me think like, I wonder why this is called because I think if it said attachment at that moment as opposed to being like the Danish title with attachment with it subtitle. So I needed to call it out because it was an interesting choice, which obviously makes sense, but it's a great reasoning behind it, so it's all good.
I tried to get them to I tried to get the subtitling company to see if they could do like the attachment come up in 3-bit, like break it up into 3 syllables and come like slanted the way that it is in the movie. And they basically, like, their response was very polite, was like, they was just like, that's not how subtitles work. Like, we can't do that.
You get white or you get yellow, and that's it.
Right. Yeah. I appreciate that you want to completely reinvent this thing that we have to do, but that's not gonna that's not gonna work for us.
That's so funny. I love it. I like The Night Has Eyes sounds cool, but attachment just seems so perfect for the nature of the story. I think that if you had gone with like Dybbuk, it might have come across more like a supernatural creature flick and been a little bit misleading. And I love the way that you kind of really have to work. Well, we're going to talk about it in a bit, but you work your way up to the supernatural stuff. You don't really just jump into it and it builds. So yeah, attachment was the perfect decision. I want to talk a little bit. That. Absolutely, truly, we love this movie. I want to talk a little bit about, you know, your cast, your actors, and specifically the relationship that you create, that Josephine and Ellie create with their characters, Maya and Leah. The whole movie, I mean, they're the heart of the movie. It feels like, you know, I mean, obviously there is also the relationship with the mother, which is incredibly important as well. But could we talk a little bit about your cast and building their relationship chemistry, and really setting the stage and making us care about their characters? Because I think that in the writing and in their performance, it is done so well, and you catch on to their awkward, funny, their chemistry
From the
is
meet
just great.
cute.
So
Yeah, from the meet
literally
cute,
from the
it's-
meet cute,
it's
dude.
great.
It's yeah. So if you could tell us a little bit about that.
So starting with Josephine, who the film is written for. So she is one of my oldest friends. We've been friends since high school. And the film actually only exists because of her, because I'd sort of been playing around when I was in film school with this idea that I wanted to make a Jewish horror movie of some sort, and like one that was kind of playful and irreverent. And like I think I was having a thing of like a lot of the movies I thought about Judaism, and a couple of Jewish horror films I've made at that point were like very kind of at pains to feel, deferential or like really kind of like accurately representative. And I was like, I feel like the Catholics don't have to deal with that shit. Like, no one watches The Exorcist and wonders like how accurate the dogma is. Like,
Yeah,
they just have all this lore and this mythology, and it's really fun and exciting, and they play with it, and whatever works they keep, whatever doesn't they kind of take out and fill in the gaps with something that'll make the story work. And I hadn't seen anyone do that with like kind of the stuff that I grew up with, and I really wanted to see that, but I had no idea for a specific story. And then just coincidentally, Josephine and I was living in New York at the time, so I came home one summer, and she and I went out drinking, and we got super duper drunk. And then she told me these stories that she hadn't told me before about her and like an ex-girlfriend of hers, and how they had they've been dating for a while, and then they'd both been between apartments, and they were sort of waiting to move into each of their new place, and they didn't really know what to do. And the ex-girlfriend, she was just like, hey, my mom has plenty of room. We can just move in with her for a bit while we wait for things to work out, and they'll be nice and cool. And then it was super duper not nice and super duper uncool.
As expected.
So yeah, exactly. So I was away when that happened, but I was like, yeah, I could have told you that. Like, I could have if you shot me a text, I would have told you not to do this. But she did do it, and then she told me these stories that were so over the top, so ludicrous, also kind of weirdly sweet, and just like we were so drunk, and I was just like, you know what, I'm going to write you a movie, and I'm going to make you a star, and this is going to be great for everyone. And as I often say, like, she did become a star, but I had nothing to do with that because I was still working out what the movie should be. At some point, like, and I guess we're getting a little bit into the territory of what the film is about as well now, but at some point, like, I was trying to figure out, this idea with these three women in a house was a great kind of premise, but there wasn't a story in it. And the deal with Jewish horror movie, that was like a world I wanted to step into, but there still wasn't a story. And I was and suddenly, like, at some point, I just started thinking about this sort of the role of the mom and the idea of the Jewish mom and the stereotypes about the Jewish mom, being overbearing and, everything being a matter of life or death, even if it's just like the most like a bowl of soup. Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And at that point, like, it's like the two things clicked into place, because I'm like, well, what if you made a movie where, like, unbeknownst to the leads and the audience, like, everything is a matter of life or death. Like, all of this, like, the stakes are as high as her seeming hysteria indicates, like, and then, the specific stories that Josephine told me didn't really work in the Jewish world, but that structure of you have these three women in a house together, that worked really well for that. And then just the movie sort of just grew from there. And Josephine's character isn't based on her, but like the film wouldn't exist without it.
Right.
Sure. And then in terms of sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna probably tee you up for what you were gonna say, but with Ellie, Leah, the actress who plays Leah, the chemistry just seems so palpable. And I had read that it was like someone that was recommended to you, and then you got the tapes, and just she happened to be on the list. But with her and Josephine, like, was it an instant click sort of thing? Because it seems like something that's so not for, like, their connection is just so good in the film.
It was weirdly in the sense of like we did like a so she was on like someone recommended it to her, and then that same day basically I got an email from a casting agent in the UK with her tape being the first one on the list, and
right.
And I saw it and thought, this is great, and I had a Zoom with her, and she was just great and like really smart about the script, and like, you know, I don't necessarily I don't mind getting notes, but it's not always the first thing you want to hear when you have like media like an actor for the first time. With her, it kind of was, because it was so incisive. Like she was like, you know, I wonder with a character like this if she wouldn't do like this, and I was like, yeah, that seems totally true. I definitely hadn't thought about that, but that's so much better than what I got. All right, just, you know, write a note down here. You know, so I was feeling pretty good about it, and then she and Josephine did like this like really kind of awful. I mean, they did a great job, but they did like an awful like chemistry. Awful because we had to do it on Zoom, which, you know, is usually the point is that you get two people in a room and you see how they interact.
Yeah.
Right. And even worse, like it was awful because I made them improvise, because I need to see if people can improvise. And like improvising over Zoom when you're like not seeing immediate body language is pretty tough. But they killed it, and they were just so funny together, and they were so sweet. And Josephine and I were in each our office at the production company that made the movie, and Ellie was in London. And once the meeting ended, I walked over to Josephine's office just to see how she felt, and she was just like, the first thing she said as I walked in was like, "It's her. It's got to be her. You got to cast her."
Hell yeah.
So I feel like yeah, it really worked. And then they were really good in that, like, the moment we had very little rehearsal time and very little prep time because of COVID, everything was just so expensive. We were shooting it like at the peak of like Delta COVID, and there were no shots in Denmark yet. So we literally couldn't afford to fly Ellie in, because we had to add 4 days to whatever we were doing. She had to quarantine for X amount of days.
Shit.
So no like rehearsal?
We could minimal. Like we had like 3 or 4 days of rehearsal. We would have, under normal circumstances, we would have had a week or so, you know, or two even. But because she had to quarantine for part of it, we just couldn't afford to take out more time.
Yeah.
But what Josephine did the moment that Ellie left quarantine was that she just like went to see her, and they just like, all right, let's talk. And they went through the script together, and they talked all the time, and they would go out for dinners, and they would tell stories about each other. And the three of us, because we were also kind of like, there wasn't like a lockdown, but we were kind of bubbling because of the production. So the three of us hung out all the time, and they just grew really close. And that chemistry is just on there, I think, from the get-go, like that they put in this work because they wanted to get to know each other really, really well as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what they, in a romantic sense, did in the film.
Yeah.
And it just, I mean, I'm really grateful that they did that, because that's what, like you said, that's what carries the movie. That's what, like, if the first 12 minutes or whatever before they go to London, you know, people would have left the movie either literally or figuratively if it weren't for the fact that they just really seem like they really, really like each other.
Yeah.
Yes. Their relationship is an absolute necessary, you know, stage for everything else to happen, and for us to be invested in what's going on with just the nature of this story. And it's from the writing to the way that they deliver it, it works perfectly. Like, you guys nailed it. So hearing that there was any, like, from the Zoom to the COVID to the limited rehearsal time, like the fact that it all fell into place so perfectly is amazing to hear. I want to bring in, I don't want to mess up her last name, but Sophie. Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, Global. Sophie Global is how you say it in Danish, or Sophie Global. It's hard. It's Grobel. I think Grobel would be the way you pronounce it in English. I don't know.
Grobel?
Just
like,
call her
that's
Sophie.
close
Grobel,
enough.
that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. Okay. Either way, Sophie.
Don't be sorry.
Sophie's performance is also amazing, and the arc of her character, you make me hate her so much. Oh, I hate her. I hate her. I hate her. I hate her. I find her so bothersome. She irks me on like every level, and then you somehow are able to so successfully flip it to where I feel so invested and care for her and everything at the end. So if you could expand a little bit about bringing her into that chemistry and their dynamic, both like in the plot of the movie, but then also, you know, off camera, and just kind of taking us on that arc journey. I'm sorry that my question's kind of all over the place, but I think
No,
not
at all. This is great. It's great. No, I think I wrote the role for Sophie. I I wrote every major role for the people that played them, and I was lucky enough they said yes, except for Ellie's. Ellie's was like Leah was the one that was the biggest blank slate, and just to slightly quickly add on to the previous answer before moving on to Sophie, I think it's also hard to understate how much more shape the character took once she signed on, and we started doing like read-throughs and talk about the script, and I rewrote the draft. I rewrote several drafts of it to shape the character after her approach to it. Because that character was like, and to the point where it was also like her character didn't read very well in the script. It was just like a blank slate until she signed on. Sophie's character. I wrote Hannah for Sophie specifically because I knew that I wanted, to make her, as you say, like kind of unbearable. Like I wanted the character to be just a nightmare to be around. And initially, at least. And the thing is that I had to be played by someone who like isn't quite a nightmare. Because if it was too, if it was laid on too thick, you would basically be telling the audience, look, I'm actually doing something different. Like there's going to be a twist or something like. I needed to keep people kind of off kilter and unsure, and so I needed someone who had this kind of like deep. I never know what to call it except for the fact that she like. This always sounds a bit trite, but like she just has this like humanity to it with which she approaches all her roles, and there's this kind of existential sadness to a lot of her roles that she just like automatically can infuse them with. And I just knew that like that was what I needed, because if she could do that, I could make her a real pain in the ass, and you still wouldn't be sure where it would be hard to kind of pin her down, and that was what was so important for me. And then in terms of, I mean, again, Sophie is like so incredibly smart, and she had so many great notes for the script. And I think in terms of getting into it on set and like off screen, the thing that worked really well was that I think that she was surprised at how much fun it could be to play her. And once she kind of got into that group, she just had a blast. We had so much fun together. I'm working on like a few things that hopefully if they get fully financed, then she would star in them as well. Because she just like went in and she's like, you know what? Yeah, let's try that, and let's do this, and let's try it this way. And it was also great because, again, it helped with that feeling I had of like, I really wanted to be hard for people to place you, to pin you down. And so I have these scenes where she goes from being like really, really, really unpleasant to weirdly vulnerable to really sweet to really fucking shitty again. And it's because we did 5 different takes and I had to try it all these different ways, and we had so much fun with it. And then in the edit, I'm kind of shaped the performance into being this like really far more like inscrutable thing. And that sounds like it's just something that you do in post, but it's not. It's like a trust thing with you and the actor. Like, you have to trust me that we're going to do it a bunch of different ways. And when I shape the performance in the edit, I'm still going to like honor your work, and it's going to feel real. I'm not going to make it seem like kind of weird and like just
Frankenstein
unnecessarily. Yeah, exactly. Like it is a real, that like working that way requires a lot of trust. And she and I established it early on, and we just had so much fun.
I think the one thing about Hannah's character is I remember taking acting classes in like early college, and then being like, you learn about your character from what you say and then what other people say about you. Right? Like that's a big thing in the writing, and I think you do such a good job of Leah saying specific things about her mother in specific ways, and then Lev also kind of saying or not saying things about the mother that just kind of turn the expectations of is she good, is she bad, like it makes them flip all the time. Like Leah talking about I want to be here to take care of her, and she obviously like agreeing with Maya saying that she maybe has a mental illness, but then you have her cooking up what seems like a potion when Maya's in her little part of the flat. Like you're toying with these different like nuggets of good or bad, and letting the audience really come up with the decision on their own until the final act where you're more or less spelling out what's actually, like literally spelling out what's actually happening when they finally agree to when Lev and Hannah finally agree to say what's going on. But I just love that you play with that. And also my last name's Goldberg. I have a bit of a Jewish heritage there, but I love
assumed as much.
there's the there's the, you know, the Jewish guilt, which is always like a part of this. I know, you know, we don't need to dive into what I thought about Beau's Afraid, but I thought this tackled it a bit better than Beau's Afraid, just in terms of, you know, it's not laid on thick. You just present a mother with very heavy Jewish guilt going, you know, happening in the scene, and you let the audience take it in, you know, and make decisions themselves, which is, I think that's how you were able to get that character across so well, is I was able to make my own decision about the character, and whether or not that was correct is, you know, it wasn't, but
Nope.
I think that's the biggest thing.
No, but I think that's definitely like also I think that's definitely true, and a big part of what I wanted with it, and just the film in general, because I think, I mean, some of the horror films I love, you know, Evil Dead 2 as a good example, but like are like just like, oh, like there's like just like there's evil, like there's like really hard, you know, capital E evil force that you're gonna have to reckon with, and that's a part of the genre I love, but there's a huge part of not just horror but also cinema in general where it's like there are a lot of people, like a lot of the things that go terribly wrong are because a lot of people think they're doing the right thing, and at a certain point they just start working against each other's interests, right? Like
Yeah.
And there's and I think that was what I want to get here. Like on some level there is a capital E evil force, but the biggest like villain in some ways is like people's distrust of each other, and therefore like no one like, and you know, like I always like, one of the criticisms I hate to hear the most is like when people say, well, you know, it's so stupid in that movie, like if they'd only said this, then everything would have been solved. Like, yeah, but that's what's interesting, right?
It's
like
the human
it is
nature.
interesting. Yeah, it is interesting in storytelling when someone doesn't do the one obvious thing that would fix things, because that's not how we work. We don't think like that.
Yeah.
It's miscommunication is our biggest folly, and also that's an interesting critique for this movie specifically, because I think why the miscommunication takes place is delivered, you know, by Hannah later, in the wanting to keep Leah happy, you know, like not telling, you know what I mean? Like it makes sense. Sorry. That's an interesting critique for this movie. I would say that's somebody that doesn't get it.
Well, sorry, to be clear, like I don't mean that critique necessarily just specifically of this one. I just mean in general. I hate it when people level that at movies, because I'm like,
yes,
that's like, sure, but you could say that about like literally any, like what, like,
right.
Do you know what? You could fix Romeo and Juliet. Right, like you can, like that's not the point, right? Like,
yeah,
right. Like, you're not meant to fix it. It's about what happens when people don't do the thing that they probably ought to.
Yeah, humans are notably bad communicators. I think people just need to understand that. Like, this is the realistic aspect of things.
Yeah.
So we talked about the, you know, Jewish guilt and the maternal one specifically, but I'm curious. You spoke about when you were creating this film wanting to land it in the Jewish horror genre, subgenre, whatever you may call it. I'm a big fan of Keith Thomas's The Vigil, which came out in 2019. I haven't witnessed a lot of Jewish horror films, actually, which I'm realizing now. And in doing some research, I noticed that there's a lot more than I probably thought. And I mean, I was looking into how the story of the Golem probably inspired Mary Shelley with Frankenstein. Like there's obviously this huge history to Jewish mysticism and Jewish horror and supernatural things. So I'm curious your ties to it, whether it's something that you knew a lot about Dybbuk's and Jewish, you know, history growing up, or if it was something you were doing a lot of research to put this into your film. Because obviously it comes across where you're not being educational necessarily. The things just exist in the film as they are, but they obviously have a great base and great grounding to them. So I'm curious where that comes from.
Yeah, no. So it's it's funny about the Jewish horror thing, because like, so I haven't seen The Vigil yet, which I should, but the reason I didn't see it at the time was because I was writing Attachment, and I was like, I don't like, this is like the only other Jewish horror movie out there. I don't want to get in my head about it, you know, like I don't want to like suddenly worry about like accidentally plagiarizing things or, you know, 100%. Stuff like that. And then I just haven't gotten around to seeing it since, which I really should rectify. But it was weird. Like I was like, yeah, man, there's no Jewish horror movies that are out. And then the year that Attachment came out, like 3 other Jewish horror movies came out. I think it played Fantastic Fest, and it was like, oh, have you noticed how much Jewish horror is here? Like, yeah, what the hell? But it's also great because I want more of it. You know, I think I grew up with the myths and like the golem especially, and like the Dybbuk. I think a lot of it I also encountered through just like a lot of Jewish literature, far more than Jewish filmmaking, a Jewish literature, and to an extent Yiddish theater. There's a lot of Jewish mythology in there. And actually, when I realized that I wanted to do something with Dybbuk, the first thing I did was I went out and got the collected stories of Isaac Bashevis Singer, who was like a Polish American Yiddish novelist and short story writer. He sort of he came from like the Shtetls, and I'm pretty sure it was Poland, and then he moved to New York, and he wrote about like Lower East Side Jews, like back in the tenements back in those days and things like that. But I'd read a bunch of his stuff when I was in high school, and I just went out and got all his short stories again and kind of read it from end to end. And there's this one story in there called The Dead Fiddler, which is this amazing story about it's a young woman who gets possessed by Dybbuk, who's the eponymous dead fiddler. And there's all these like kind of really grotesque kind of body horror like descriptions of what happens to her body and her face and her voice that comes kind of disembodied. A lot of the stuff we did to Ellie in the film, I cribbed from, including like the distended stomach is something from that short story. It's never explained. It's just there. So we give her a distended stomach and just never explained it and just put that there. So it gets possessed by this one Dybbuk, but then after a while, it gets possessed by a second Dybbuk, which is like a dead prostitute. And then the two Dybbuks start arguing really back and forth. It becomes like a weird slapstick, kind of like Abbott and Costello thing. And then eventually the rabbi it's so good. It's so good. I think it might be, I don't know if you subscribe to the New Yorker, but it's in their archives, I think, because it was published in the New Yorker back in the day. But then finally the rabbi is like, okay, you know what? I think I know what to do. So the rabbi basically like sets the two Dybbuks up with each other to fall in love, and they do. And then they plan a big marriage, and he weds them. And as their honeymoon, they leave the young woman's body. Like the exorcism is the honeymoon. And I read that, and I was like, exactly. Like I read that, I was like, that's the feeling I want the movie to have. Like there's both the mythology is serious, but there's also this kind of like playfulness to it, and it's ultimately about like kind of relationships and like people trying to solve problems, and it's weirdly sweet and yet weirdly dark at the same time. And I think one of the things that I feel like, because there's so much of I don't say this to exclusion of other cultures, but certainly Jewish culture is very characterized by a lot of like, again, playfulness and like winking jokes and like a sense that you can like, even at least the sort of non-Holocaust art is like tends to be pretty funny even about like the deepest misery of things, and like I just feel like that's such a great kind of register to approach horror in. Because horror really flourishes with all these feelings, right? Like horror, I think, just becomes richer when there's jokes in it, and when there's genuine sadness in it, and when there's like playfulness to it, and so that I think was why I wanted to kind of move into the small but growing Jewish horror space. Yeah,
I think you also with the I'm the self-deprecating humor guy over here, so I completely understand that aspect of it. But David Denchik, is that how you pronounce his last name? Lev's character is so funny, but in the most like just very basic and natural and organic way. Like Maya saying it's a Dybbuk, it's a ghost. He's like, no, it's not a ghost, it's a Dybbuk. Like that back and forth is so funny, and even just the way he talks to Hannah in the forest, and like talking about why they're in the forest, it's so far away from the house, and like I felt like my grandpa talking essentially. It felt so real to me. But it added the levity, that you're kind of that you're talking about. It's so clear, and I loved that was in there.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say I want to also throw in my applause really quick to the comedy aspect, because comedy and horror are a thing that I it doesn't work a lot of the time for me, at least the way a lot of people approach it. And it's just like Steve was saying, the way that it feels really natural. It doesn't feel like you're setting up this moment where you're like, laugh now, it's very like even just the peanut allergy reaction. He's like, well, don't throw it on the ground. I love it. It feels it feels natural, and I'm like, wait, why is that not supposed to be funny to me, because I found that funny, sorry, just had to throw in my 2 cents there.
No, for sure. No, that's great. No, well, I also think, the thing that he and I talked about, because we actually spent a little bit of a while, he's also Jewish and I'm Jewish, but like there are not a lot of Jews in Denmark, so we were like often the only 2 Jews on set. But we were sort of talking about like frames of reference for him and like the different kind of sort of like types of that kind of guy that we've met in our lives. But something we agree with, like, look, I think fundamentally he has to be like actually a really kind, really sweet guy, but he like cannot read a room for the life of it. Like so important that like that you just like missed the point constantly. Yes. And all of the best jokes came up because he would be like, we would just I'd go like we'd do a take, like I was like, okay, this time can you just like really fixate? Oh, like what's the least important thing in the scene? I want you to really fixate on that. And we had so much fun with that.
Oh, what great direction.
Yeah. But yeah, he's great. And the thing with the fours, this was one of my favorite. It was such a funny, like we were on set and he reasonably came up to me and was like, I feel like we're making this joke about why are we in this forest a lot of times. Like I think it's going to get a little boring. And I said, no, I think you don't understand. It's not going to be truly funny until the 4th time you say it.
Yeah.
It might be kind of funny, but it won't really be funny until you take it away too far.
Yeah, and just like the way that by then you're fairly familiar with his character, and you're like, this guy is he's nice, his intentions are good, but he's just so bothered and fixated on certain things, and that's just funny. Even in this dire situation, he's like, this doesn't make sense. People just don't make sense to him.
Exactly.
But I really want to. You talked a bit about we talked about like Jewish horror. We actually had the pleasure of having Keith Thomas on, the director of The Vigil. And I know that it might have been weird to see like this almost mini boom of Jewish horror movies, but I think you guys are bringing completely different things to the table, and I'm excited for you to see the movie. I want to talk a bit about this movie is so refreshing because it's a possession movie that feels really different. Like you've said, there's a ton of Catholic and Christian possession movies. I'm frankly exhausted. Like we have this new Exorcist coming out. I'm not trying to shoot anything down before I've seen it, but I am exhausted. And I think the general, Catholic cautionary tale about why kids shouldn't touch a Ouija boards or a demon's going to teach them a new language and make them puke all over the place is just a bit tired for me. So this movie's really refreshing, and I want to jump into how you guys went about the possession here, because it does feel a lot more natural and very different. You were referencing that story, but could you talk a little bit about specifically how you guys built the possession, working with Leah and in writing it?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think that was really important from the get-go. And it was hard because a lot of people in the development process understand it was like, who is the Dybbuk and what's the backstory in that? And I kind of tried to write it a couple of times, but like it never really worked. And it was because like one of the things that I wanted to do with it, and I was saying is like the moment I give this Dybbuk a character and a backstory, I'm telling people that the movie's about the Dybbuk.
Right.
Yes.
It stops being, a sort of more of like a vessel for certain feelings and ideas. Like the Dybbuk is basically like, to the extent that he's anything specific, he's a metaphor for the baggage that we carry around, right? Like the shit that we sort of bring into each other's lives, wittingly or unwittingly, and I just wanted him to be vague for that reason. And then, again, the one time I tried to give him a backstory, it just didn't work. And so instead, Ellie and I, we worked a lot on what his like tone was like. We kind of made him a bit of like a chaos agent, and like about how much fun we could have with that idea. Mm-hmm. And we were like, well, why is he chaos? And he was like, well, maybe he's been doing this for centuries. Like this is whatever he may once have been, or whoever he may once have been. Like he has been kind of filed down to just this pure sense of like, I am here to fuck with people.
Mhm.
I'm here to be miserable. And also I can play a longer game than any of you, because unless you actually find a way to get rid of me, I can just wait shit out. I can move on. I can do other stuff. And once we work with that aspect of it, it was a lot easier for me and Ellie to figure out stuff like, well, how does he move? So we got a choreographer in, and we actually talked to the choreographer about like what are interesting ways of him moving. Ellie watched a lot of videos of foxes. So a lot of the way that she like looks and moves her head is because she was watching videos of foxes over and over.
Okay.
Because she was like, oh, he's like sly, probably, like he's figured out how to do this for so long. He's really good at being a Dybbuk. And
Bro.
then exactly. And in terms of like the possession leading up to it, those are actually some of my bigger regrets with the film, was just that because of scheduling and budget, we could include some scenes that I'd written that I was really pleased about, but we couldn't get them in there. But like, we had the idea was that in that sort of third act, there's like that little time jump, and suddenly she's just like not doing well.
Sure.
And that there's some of it in there, like she uses her knowledge of Maya against Maya, and she uses the fact that like they love each other as a way to fuck with her. But there's more stuff in the script in that respect that I think would have made it even more unpleasant, but we were kind of racing against the clock constantly, and I had to cut some darlings, as you have to.
Yeah.
But that was like, but it just in terms of like in the writing and how we're prepping when we're shooting it, a lot of like the possession became like, well, we're adding all these like physical things to her that again were mostly stolen from this Bathsheba Singer short story. But then in terms of how she starts behaviorally changing, she just starts getting more and more like cutting and using like Maya's adoration of her against her. Like in this, there's still some of it left. There's a scene where she's like, you just, that's what you do. Like you're old, your life is all broken now, and you just come into other people's lives to break them because you don't know what to do about your own life. And like that stuff's still in there. But that was how we wanted to see her change. Because that's what we said that the Dybbuk character also likes. Like he likes the emotional torture of it all.
Yeah. A line that really sticks out to me is when they have, well, so you're talking about the kind of like the playfulness. I like when they kind of first unfreeze her, and he's like, oh, how exciting, once he realizes like what's going on, and then the sadism towards Anna about like, if you knew how many of those routines and rituals were a waste of time, and just watching her, even though I've been trapped and you have successfully kept me in chains this long, trapped in this body, I've still enjoyed watching you ruin your life and ruin, frankly, your relationship with your daughter. I know that's not directly said, but I loved that. The sadism there, I was like, perfect. It's not just about like making things float and jump around, and the way you guys approach it, it's unfortunate to hear that you had to kill your darlings, like you said, but I don't think it feels like the foreplay in this possession is good enough that I think it works. You didn't just turn up the juice too fast,
right? And
it all comes through.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that. And I also really I really like I that is one of my favorite like moments in the film when he says that.
It's so
because
good.
But also because I feel like one of the things that's sort of, and also just the way that Sophia responds to it and the way it comes out, there's this feeling like, like you said, like he's been fine, like hiding inside of her, because like he's done so well from there, like just from having like, just from the fact that they know he can come back, she ruined her life, and in some ways kind of ruined parts of her daughter's life, and all these things went wrong, and all he had to do was just sit there and watch it play out. And I can't remember who it was, but someone at the rap party said this thing that like, this wasn't the case, but it was just such a fun observation that like, maybe the sort of seizure at the beginning of the film that ultimately brings her back to London is actually the Dybbuk wanting to get back, because he's been away from his favorite like kind of torture victim for too long, and he wants to fuck up Hannah's life a bit more. Which that seems so smart and totally not what I thought about. But like,
it's an onion.
I like that interpretation.
We got layers.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
I was wondering the relationship between her mother trying to contact her and her not answering the phone, like all of those things seem to coincide at the same moment. I also like, you normally in possession films, there's a bit of a ramping up, but it's like a not possessed, kind of possessed and looks a little pale, and then like really, head spinning around. And you treat this possession like a disease to where, if she has chicken soup for the soul, she's gonna be okay or have limited side effects. There's Sean had mentioned this when we were talking about it off of the pod, but there's really realistic side effects like disassociation and sleepwalking, seizures, things that you just accept. You know what I mean? That I think because they're so realistic, those parts freak me out the most. Like the beginning, when she gets out of bed and is just staring at herself in the mirror is disconcerting, but also very realistic. And then the moment, again, this is where we can go into the kind of the camera work, but whenever you're doing those moments of both of them in bed, you have a slow zoom, slow push in, and then a slow pull out. And when you do it at the summer home, during the slow pull out, I was used to, she gets out of bed, she starts freaking out in bed, and then is going to go walk to the side. But you have Ellie cross the camera too close for comfort, and it was one of the most at an angle, and it was one of the most like it made me feel off kilter more than anything else in the film. But I love the way that the possession is really grounded in reality and feels like a disease as opposed to like it didn't feel like a completely different human just taking over. It felt parasitic in a way.
Yeah.
No, and that's totally what it was meant to. I mean, that is precisely what I wanted it to be. Again, like I wanted it to have this quality that felt, again, sort of metaphoric almost, right? Like it's like, and also the kind of stuff that if you didn't know better, in terms of like, in other words, like in this case, like if you weren't like the mother who witnessed the full-on possessed state of her daughter by this Dybbuk, right? If you're just like someone who's fallen in love with her, then like, yeah, she sleepwalks, whatever. It's where she has seizures. People have seizures, she's morose and unhappy. Yeah, I mean, depressed. But yeah, exactly. Yeah, just like how I am most of the time. I don't know, but like it was very much that feeling like, again, obviously the audience will know that something's up because they know what they've bought a ticket to go see or what they've decided to stream or whatever. Like, but that's good, right? Like you want to use that information against your characters. You want it to feel like, oh shit, I understand why you don't think that too much is wrong right now. But I know that something more is up just by virtue of having gone to see this movie in whatever way I've chose to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that tension is, is what's exciting. And then, in terms of the camera, like, it's funny you mentioned that shot because we originally planned that we would have her be a little closer to Maya, so she would like fill up the frame with her head when she walked past, and we would do a focus rack, which is always tricky with zoom lenses, some boring 100%. Stuff. But like it's not, the zooms we had were fine for you, but it's not always like the most elegant thing you do. But then we were just like blocking out the shot, and she walked past in that weird, like, oh, it's too close, and she's all blurry, and like Maya's just lying there, and she's still in focus. Like that's way worse.
Yeah.
And so we just like, okay, cool, that's what we're doing. And then the first AD was really relieved because it it meant less time. But we were just like, the DP was like, yeah, this is great. That looks all wrong in all the best ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had the movement down to where it was so unnatural, but like just it hit. I was just like, that was a fucked shot. That was so good. But so to talking about the camera work, there's moments that feel very intentional. And I mean, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that they were all intentional, but the editing in the first 12 minutes or so is so slick. Not that the rest of the film isn't, but it seems very purposefully slick to get their relationship really cemented in people's minds, whether it's the match cuts underneath the table or the quick, really uncertain feeling moments where Ellie's looking one way and then you kind of do a match cut, but she's looking the other way when she's kind of disassociating for a moment. You also have when Ellie is leaving and Maya's sitting on one side, framed in a cage in the staircase, and Ellie's on the other side, and then they eventually come together in the full frame. So I'm curious, just from a film nerd perspective, how much you're thinking about that in the original pass of the script, like how you're framing things, how you want them to feel. Or, I mean, I know I was looking, and it seems like the DP, Valdemar Vinge Leisner. Hopefully I said that correctly.
Carl Vinge Leisner, who is also my stepbrother, as it happens to be.
Oh, no way.
Whoa.
So it felt like it was a
It's
really
a real
cohesive
family affair, but
yeah, it felt like a really cohesive thing. Like the way it was shot was just like very smooth and very natural, and really helped the story in every way. So I was just curious how much of that went into the pre-production and even the writing of the film.
Tons. I mean, I always I think a lot about how I'd like to cover a scene when I write.
Okay.
And then 90% of the time, that's not how you wind up covering it. But the reason I try to think about it, I mean, sometimes sometimes it sucks because like I'll get stuck on something like, I don't need to figure this out right now. Like I could just move on.
Yeah.
But the best of times, it just gives you an idea because, it's a storytelling tool, right? Like it's not like I'm necessarily thinking about how I would cover it in terms of like what would be the coolest shots. It would be like, well, maybe there's a way that I can introduce this thing in a way that will give me some tension that I can use in a later scene.
Mm-hmm.
And that in that way you have to think about how you would shoot it, how you would cut it. But so it's there in a lot of the writing. Then it changes over with subsequent drafts. Then Valdemar and I did, shot lists for every scene, talked about every single shot we want. And we talked about the shot list in terms of like, we would go through the scene and go like, well, this would be an interesting place to cut here, and this would be an interesting place to cut here, and maybe you'd want the camera to do this and this. And I always like to think about how I can get as many shots into a shot as possible. Meaning, like, can I choreograph the movement so I actually get, I can use one shot to basically get two different shot sizes, one on her here, but then if the camera turns on that movement, say you get a close up here, she crosses and the camera turns and we get the other actor, but now we have like, that's her medium.
Right.
Then that's great. Like that, so things like that, I try to think about a lot. Both because it sort of helps and it can save time, which is the most valuable resource on a film set more than genuinely anything. But also because it's the kind of things that while we may not think about when we watch a movie, it's what makes film cinematic. It's like, it's the intentionality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then, we'll make these shot lists and then reality sets in and you're on set and you have to cut a bunch of stuff. And there's a bunch of scenes where I would have wanted to do more. But again, Danish shooting days are also much shorter than American ones. American shooting days, union hours are about 12 usually. And Danish union hours are 8. So you get 2/3 of the time. And I went to film school in the US, so obviously, like, I had a really hard time getting used to that.
Yeah, you're used to it.
And I had some lovely producers who like got me a bit of overtime, but the budget was tiny, so there wasn't like a lot to take there. But so some scenes you do wind up just like covering, like, all right, let's just get 2 singles and a 2-shot, and move on because this isn't the scene that we get to be precious with today, unfortunately, and so you scrap shots here and there. But by and large, there's not a scene that we go through that we haven't shot listed in some version and that I haven't thought of how I'd like to cut it in the editing room. But then again, you get to the editing room and then your footage tells you, no, I kind of want to do something different.
Yeah.
Or the things, like that opening, it is very slickly edited. I had a wonderful editor work on it. But that is very different to what the first cut was. And it's very different to what the script was. We changed a bunch of stuff around and moved things around, and we created a different flow. The match cuts with the knees were always there. They were that scene is pretty much the same, cut the exact same way as it was when we first cut it. But almost everything else we jumbled up in a bunch of different ways. Not the scene where she wakes up the first time at night, because that one, there are only so many ways you can cut it. Like, you have to start with this shot, you have to move to this shot, you have to go to this. That doesn't leave.
That's the horror element of it.
Yeah, you can try different takes, but that one was pretty much storyboarded and cut as it was storyboarded. Like, there are only so many options, but all the other things and the sequencing and the way where the music kicks in, very different to what we originally planned, because you come home and the footage just wants to do something different. And then the trick is, how do you make it feel as intentional as the stuff that you boarded and shot as it was boarded? Like, how do you make it feel as though this is the way it has to be? And that's what's so much fun about, this job. Like, it's tough and unreliable and pays for shit, but it's but there's sort of the weird magic you get when you sit with someone and you go like, okay, well, actually, weirdly, the feeling that I wanted from this moment is much stronger if we do it the completely different way around than I had intended. All my precious plans were for naught because this is much better.
Yeah. It seems like between your vision and what you were bringing to the table and what everyone else brought to the table and what the situation itself brought to the table, it all just mixed so perfectly. I want to say that I appreciate sometimes in a lot of movies today, and especially a lot of horror movies today, it almost feels like every single shot is so focused on being this like almost overwhelmingly beautiful cinematic piece, and everything from the way that it's composed to the movement and the color grading, that it's almost distracting and it takes away from the story. And this feels like, I hope that this isn't misunderstood at all, it feels like naturally beautiful and like not distracting. Like everything that the way that you shot this movie serves it, and it feels beautiful, but while also feeling like normal. Does that make sense? It's not like show-offy.
Totally. And I really appreciate that, because that was actually like, that's what we wanted to do with it. Like, we were watching a bunch of references, because at first we were like, oh, maybe we want to do like a first act that feels like really kind of loose and rom-com-y, and everything is two shots and people staring into each other's eyes, and we have it fun and live that way. And then we get into the second act and we make it like a Polanski movie. It's all like tight close-ups of her and then everything else looking really weird, and we'll fuck with perspective. And then at a certain point, as we're kind of trying to talk to themselves, like, me and Valerie were kind of looking, she was like, it sounds kind of exhausting, actually. That sounds really it sounds like we might be getting in the way of the story a bit. And so like, I was like, what's the other way of doing it? And then we actually watched, and it was a real kind of like game changer for us. We watched Under the Shadow, the Iranian movie. I mean, it's shot in Jordan, but the one with the djinn and in the walk up in this apartment building. A very different movie in all these, in a variety of ways. But what it does so interesting is, like, if you watch the first 10 minutes of that, you could be convinced that it was just like a new Iranian cinema. Like, you could be convinced that it was like an Asghar Farhadi movie or something like that. And then when the supernatural scare shit starts happening, it doesn't change its like film language. Like, it's the same movie. It looks the same. It feels the same. It's like the scariness creeps into it. And in some ways that was so much more unsettling. Because we're like, oh, actually, now I don't know. Like, you're not necessarily telling me when things are going to be weird or not. That's kind of freaky.
Yeah.
And that was a real kind of...
Sorry, my bad. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Good.
Well, I was just going to say,
just like...
For me, this is something I feel so strongly about, because a lot of the times it feels like, especially when you're trying to be scary, it now feels like, oh, there's this performance, and it takes like a realness out of it. And I love the way that you just said that the scary kind of creeps in. It feels like when you do it right, it feels like the spooky is coming into my world, and it's not just that the show is being put on for me. And sometimes the show is exactly what I need and what the story needs, but sometimes it's not, and it feels like a lot, like too many things, in my opinion, are really going for the big show sometimes. And yeah.
Well, I also think it's a thing of like, I think also a really meaningful question there is like, what, like, I don't, to veer into sort of, graduate film pretension again, but like, or like graduate school pretension again, like, I don't personally believe that like the sort of form v substance thing is a real dichotomy. Like, I think that's bullshit. I think that like every work of art has like an ideal way in which it can like express itself, where some things might just require really formal, like heavily formal language to express the ideas that it's trying to express, the feelings it's trying to express, because that's what makes sense for it. And some things need something that's far more pared back, or far more like, we're not going to make you, we're going to try to make you forget that you're watching a movie, reading a book, whatever, and I think I have favorite works of art that fall into either camp. I think the frustrating thing, the feeling that like when the show is being put on for you, is because there's a mismatch between the feelings and ideas that are trying to be projected out there and the way in which they're doing it.
100%. I could not agree more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm so glad that we had that final act of the episode film nerd deep dive there, because that's I really wanted to make sure that we touched on that before wrapping up, and that was wonderful insight there. Gabriel, we really appreciate your time. Again, we love Attachment. We hope everyone else can, if they haven't seen it and are listening to this right now, go check it out on Shudder. Before we let you go, I mentioned this before we started recording, but we love to end our episodes with a moment that we call mostly horror recommendations. And that is a horror film and then maybe a non-horror film that you would recommend to our listeners. So you got no constraints. They can be anything that you want. Would love to hear what you recommend.
Okay, so I'm not planning to cheat, but I probably will and mention more than one movie. But
Go ahead.
I'm going to try to stick to the rules of the channel. So the first horror movie I would recommend, if they haven't seen it, it's sort of, I mean, some people want to debate whether it's horror, and I don't think that they should. But that's Brian De Palma's Phantom of the Paradise, which is one of my favorite films of all time. One of those films that I saw, again, I think it was 13 maybe the first time I saw it. It was on late at night.
Got it.
And I was like up watching TV late, and it just suddenly showed up, and I was like, what is this amazing fucking horror glam rock spin on Phantom of the Opera, but with music by the dude who wrote the music for the Muppets movie? Like, what the hell? And
I gotta tell you,
it's
I don't know what this is. I'm looking at Google Images and hearing your description
You've never heard
while
of Phantom
doing
of the
it.
Paradise?
No, I guess not.
It's one of the, I saw, I mean, I've seen it more times than I can count, but the last time I saw it was, I think it was 2016, and they were doing a big Brian De Palma retrospective at the Metrograph, shortly after the Metrograph had opened. And I took a bunch of my friends to see it, like, they were like not into the idea. And then we saw it, and we all just left with like the biggest smiles. Like, it is pure bonanza gloriousness. I love it so much.
I'm so sold.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's great. I cannot recommend enough. And then another movie that like has like, it just came out this year. It's weirdly, I'm only calling it a horror movie because for some reason this one has been put in a bunch of horror brackets, and I don't think it is horror. I guess there's like body horror aspects to it, but I just want to highlight it because it's the best film I've seen this year. Is Sick of Myself, the Norwegian film.
Oh no,
I didn't see that either.
Sick of Myself?
Sick of Myself. It's Christopher Borgli is his name. He's Norwegian. I can't remember who distributed it. Maybe it's Neon or something, but Ari Aster and Lars Knudsen are producing his next movie, which is with Nicolas Cage. I think it's premiering at TIFF, and it's about like a man who wakes up and suddenly everyone knows who he is or something. I don't know. I don't really know much about it. But anyway, if it's even like half as good as Sick of Myself, it's going to be great. But that is one of the sharpest, funniest, and most unpleasant films I've seen in a very long time.
Wow.
So highly recommend that. Then in the decidedly non-horror film, I think. So one of my favorite films of all time is Mikey and Nicky, the Elaine May movie, with Peter Falk and John Cassavetes, which is basically her doing John Cassavetes almost better than John Cassavetes does John Cassavetes, with him in it. But it's just the most like, I think it's one of the most like wild and unwieldy, and yet sort of it's so wild and unwieldy in it, like its shape and its story, and also like apparently like it was so chaotic in its production, but it's so precise in its the way that like these characters' relationship is depicted, and like in the weird way in which like these two mobsters who should just be like pieces of shit, and they are, also feel like really achingly human, and there's something so painful about the inevitability with which they're going to like destroy each other. And I think that's and it's also just deeply, deeply funny, like everything she did. So if anyone out there has not seen Mikey and Nicky, I highly, highly recommend it. And then, well, I don't know. I think that's probably. I'll leave it at that.
I was gonna say Mikey and Nicky's great. I remember the first time I heard about Mikey and Nicky. was the Safdies talking about it, and it made so much sense that they loved it because of the way that the film is. But Mikey and Nikki is phenomenal and a great recommendation. I also love just looking back at Sick of Myself. It's funny because Sean and I just talked to a Norwegian. I think we talked to a Norwegian director in our last episode, and just something about Scandinavian horror is like or just like the style of drama and horror that they do is so interesting. So to see even just the few things I'm seeing of Sick of Myself, I'm literally going to try to watch this tonight probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I still find it odd that people put it in the horror bracket because I don't really consider it a horror movie, but it is the darkest comedy I've seen in a long time, and it is the funniest comedy I've seen in a long time. Like I was
wow,
like
very excited,
constantly taken aback by how sharp, and also just, you know, there's a real art to making properly fully unlikable people. Like it's actually quite hard to pull that off.
Yeah.
And these wowie, they're just all of them are just fucking nightmares. It's so good.
We need your quote on like the DVD to just be wowie.
Wowie.
Love it.
Those are
excited to watch it.
Yeah, those are amazing recs. Gabriel, again, we really appreciate the time. Excited for more people to check out Attachment if they haven't already. Excited for the films with Sophie that you were talking about. Hopefully getting financed soon and hearing more about them in the future. But again, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate your time. Thank you guys so much for listening to our interview with Gabriel Bier Gislason. Again, if you for some reason didn't listen to us at the beginning and you checked out that whole interview without watching Attachment, go watch Attachment now. I probably don't have to tell you that because you enjoyed the interview so much that you are watching Attachment already. But thank you again to Gabriel for taking the time out. Loved chatting with him. We have a new segment that we want to introduce. I'm going to let Sean take it away.
But I'm telling you that those things exist.
There's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely.
I'll be right here.
A fucking alien.
I'm going to assume that a really cool segment sound song thing just played, and that I actually did what I plan to do, and that's create one of those. I just want to introduce this idea because, you know, I've obviously been talking about aliens a lot lately, and with the nature of what's happening in the world right now, and especially in this country, I'm going to be talking about aliens a lot more. I see myself, dude, I'm unwinding. I don't know. I've been watching like nothing but alien docs. Like have always been a consumer of those, but I've been watching all the ones that I haven't seen. Just been shoveling them into my mind. But yeah, I just wanted to give a couple updates. Right now we're on, Congress is on its August recess. But there have been a couple things that have happened since we last talked. The White House has not aggressively, people are bringing up this topic during certain press things. I'm not going to point to any specific one. Nothing huge happened at them where I think you need to go watch them, but it's happened at multiple where a news reporter will ask a speaker for the White House, and the White House is not even attempting to directly deny any of David Grush's claims. Yeah. So they are, I find that really interesting. And then one of the speakers that was at the hearing that happened a couple weeks ago, his name was Ryan Graves, and he was he's like an executive director of the Americans for Safe Airspace. He's a pilot. He has recently taken to Twitter. He's recently taken to Twitter and said that with the permission of his fellow commercial pilots, they have a ton of video that they've gotten over the years that he is going to start releasing on this Twitter feed. right now, in terms of things that the Pentagon and just overall our government have been releasing, it's all been pretty old, the grainiest in terms of videos, what people are looking for, not always the best footage or the most convincing footage. And so
in black and white.
Yes. And I mean, granted, there are reasons for that. That does not dismiss any of those. We talked about it the last time we talked about it, about how the video is the least important aspects of those recordings. It's all the data and things that they get that prove that these are there. Like when in terms of proof, the data that us normal people don't know how to read is what really matters in proving this stuff, way more important than a video. But there are plenty of videos and other recordings, not military grade type of sensor stuff, but that commercial pilots get all the time. And so apparently we're going to start getting some of that information. I'm very, very, very curious about that. The other interesting thing is that so the whole concept here that we're entertaining and that the show that Congress is kind of putting on. Remember when I said there's kind of like two options? There's in the assumption that this is all real. There's two ways that this could go down. Either for the past several decades, our government, in terms of like our Congress and the acting president at any given time, doesn't actually know about all this stuff, and that it's all private companies and like the military industrial complex working with these private companies that are handling this information. And that they're so powerful that like it doesn't matter if you're the president, you're looking into it. It's on a need to know basis, and you do not need to fucking know. That's one aspect, that that's truly what's happening, or that the government has been involved and is now putting on a show acting like they haven't for the sake of like their power structure. I'm leaning more, I don't know. I used to kind of lean towards, I think they know and this is a lie, but now I'm thinking, nah, these private individuals and companies are probably what really has control over this. But sorry,
I feel like they have to know. I feel like
the government has to know.
Yeah.
I feel like they might know certain things. I feel like they have to know about like whether or not certain things are real. Probably. I'm sure there's an amount of showmanship, but in terms of like all the details, I do not. I mean, the president is a temporary employee. It's always been that way. I think removing aliens from the conversation entirely, I think the president might have started off as a legitimate thing, but has since just become a mascot, a scapegoat, a something for us to focus on while the people that are actually in charge make the real decisions. It just, I don't know. But so the other general idea is that these companies are owning this because they're basically the ones that can reverse engineer this technology, assuming that we have landed craft and things like that these companies are actively trying to reverse engineer it and have been. I mean, there's a whole thing about, dude, I can show you some stuff from Nazi Germany in terms of reverse engineering this kind of craft. It's fucking nuts. I've been going down a rabbit hole, but because I could keep going on, and I'm not the person that can tie these together. I'm going to put together a list of docs I think you all should watch if you want to be accurately brainwashed like me. But one of the companies that David Grush is accusing is Lockheed Martin, which I should know a lot more about, but I don't. But they have been addressed as well. They've been asked questions about this since those accusations have come out. And the only comment that they make every time is, quote, "Questions about UAPs are best addressed by the US government," end quote. They don't go on to do an elaborate, denial. They truly just go and they put their hands up and they say, we are not entertaining this. We are not engaging in this. And I find that interesting, and I'm curious what your thoughts are initially without having watched the hours and hours and hours and hours of brain-numbing documentaries that I have.
So I will say
about that?
Lockheed Martin Corporation is a American aerospace arms defense information security and technology corporation with worldwide interests. I think they make military planes. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew they were one of the big boys. I just don't know all the details.
I don't know. I mean, I think that I always feel like you should just say, like, we're not involved in this if you're not involved in this.
They're not saying that.
I think pleading the fifth is always an interesting take. But I think when you're a company that's that large, you just don't, it's all dictated by legal. I don't know. Again, they're probably, if this shit's going on and people are trying to reverse engineer stuff, it's probably all under wraps with these huge corporations. And I'm sure, there's a few people that know about it. But no matter what, with any type of conflict or whatever, like sometimes the PR move is plead the fifth or just, don't say anything. Like the best answer is no answer. So I don't know if it indicates anything to me. I think it's interesting.
I thought it was interesting.
But I don't think it's a signifier of anything. But I can see why it looks like one, obviously.
Aliens. They're fucking coming. But yeah, so not a ton of stuff. Just keeping an eye on in that general direction. I totally agree with you. I don't know that necessarily is this whatever, but I do find it incredibly interesting, especially with the stuff that I have watched.
Yeah,
with
everything
that,
looks suspicious now.
Yeah, I'm promising you guys. I didn't do it today. I should have done it, but next week on this segment, I am going to give you 3 to 5 documentaries that you should watch in a certain order. I'm going to be like, watch this, then watch this, then watch this, then watch this, and just see if you end up on the same side of nuts that I do. And we'll go from there. But this is the intro to our as of now unnamed segment, but there will be a name and a cool little schwifty-doo. Yeah. By the time you're hearing this.
And that can be a good combination with Rex. They can be your Rex for next week.
Yeah.
On that note, it's time for our mostly horror recommendation of the week. I have one. Do you want me to go first, Sean? So you can
you go first.
You can get a recommendation. Recently moved, getting new posters for the apartment, and for my office specifically. I bought a Cloverfield one. Everyone knows I love Cloverfield. I also got a Green Knight one. I really love that poster. The third poster that I got is of a film that I love, that I became obsessed with over lockdown, quarantine, and I don't think that I've recommended it on the show, at least for our mostly horror recommendations, but it is Julia Ducournau's 2016 film Raw, which in French is called Grave. It's a film about a teen who is in her first year of vet school, where her older sister is also at. She is hazed and is forced to eat raw meat for the first time in her life. And things happen after that. It is, coming of age films are always great, but coming of age horror films, when done right, are some of my favorite horror films. I think this one is just perfect. It is a 5 out of 5 film, one of my favorites. And I don't think that I've recommended it, or if I have, I haven't done it enough. So
sure.
People might have seen Julia Ducournau's film Titan, which came out and won the Palme d'Or at Cannes and was really big and really crazy. But this is, I believe, her first film, and it is just, I love it so much. So yeah.
Hell yeah. We've definitely talked about it,
we've talked about the film, but
we've never made it an official rec. So, I also love that movie. So I definitely support that. I was going to try to think of something, but the reality is that I was being completely honest in that outside of work, I have exclusively been watching Alien docs and South Park, frankly. So maybe Get on My Vibe is my rec this week. Is do some stuff that will loosen you up a little bit. Crack open a beer, smoke a little herb, do a little something, and unless you're underage, in which case don't do those things. And maybe watch an episode or two of South Park and then throw on an Alien doc. My official rec is going to be that you watch Unacknowledged. I know that I have talked about that, but I've never officially recommended it. That is my official rec for this week. I want you to take that in and then just sit on it. Don't watch any other docs. Sit on that, soak that up. If you need to, watch it twice. Watch it on Wednesday, watch it on Thursday. All right. And then come back next week, and I'm gonna throw 3 more at you. And by then I'm priming you up. All right, I'm warming you up for the nuts that's gonna come right after that. So,
all right,
there we go.
That's that's good. I need to send you. I sent Chelsea. A lot of my TikTok recently has been the like AI covers of songs. So like Frank Sinatra singing "Levitate" by Dua Lipa and stuff like that. There's one came across my For You page, and it's Cartman singing the Titanic song, Celine Dion's whatever it's called. And I sent that to Chelsea, and she sent me back OMG shaking. So either have her show it to you, or I'll send it over. But
I'm surprised that she didn't show it to me. Oh, I have another rec. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I have to do it.
Go ahead.
You reminded me.
Okay.
Me and Chelsea have been listening to a lot of Daughtry. We've been listening.
Okay.
We've been listening to so much Daughtry. Dude, don't you shake your head, man. All right? Daughtry fucks. I don't care what anybody says. Said, it's not over. Get the fuck out of here. It's a bop.
Whew. All right. If you're still listening, what do you think of Daughtry? Do you think aliens are real? Any thoughts on the MonsterVerse series coming to Apple, or the Prey physical release, or the Texas Chain Massacre game? Have you seen Attachment? Let us know what you think. You can do all that in an email to mostlyhorrormovienight@gmail.com. That was our old name, but our current email. You can also hit us up on Twitter, because I'm not calling it X, @mostlyhorror. We're also on TikTok @mostlyhorror, and Instagram is mostlyhorrorpod. You can find me online at Steven is Average, and Sean is on all the socials at Hypocrite Inc. or hypocrite.inc. And that is all we got for you this week. We will catch you next time.
Goodbye.